Building a life-proof van electrical system. Definitely one of the harder things I've ever taken on. When I started building this van, I intended to live out of it full-time, as well as work my day job remotely. After over 2 years of doing so, I'm really thrilled on how this electrical system came out, and I want to break it down as simply as possible for anyone who is having trouble with their electrical systems or is in the process of building a van currently. My high-level goal was to be able to live and work anywhere, no matter how remote, no matter how stormy, snowy, or crazy of a location. I need to be able to work 8 hours on my laptop, powering 2 monitors and my internet, and any of the appliances that I needed to cook, shower, heat the van, and have any other amenity that I would normally have in a home. So in this next series of videos, I'm going to break this all down into simple and easy to understand parts. In this first video, we're going to go over my battery capacity, the batteries that I picked, how I monitor my batteries, and what each appliance uses roughly so that you can break down what you may need for your electrical system to start. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, as I'm going to try to answer all the questions that are left in comments either directly or in a future video. And that way I can help people the way I would have wanted to be helped when I was building out this van behind me. All right, so before we jump back to the battery bank, it's probably most helpful to give a quick overview of what comprises of a battery bank. There are a lot of different options out there. So I figured I'd break it down real quick for a few different configurations and options that you could consider. For all intents and purposes, there are a couple different voltage battery configurations that you could be using. To keep this video series simple, I'm only going to run through 12-volt battery bank configurations. Running a 12-volt battery bank is more than enough to power your entire van however you want for any need. There are 24-volt and 48-volt battery configurations, but we're just not going to consider those for this video series, as those are more advanced configurations. So we're going to stick with 12-volt for now. All right, so 12-volt battery banks are the same as 12.8-volt battery banks. So anywhere you see online a 12-volt or a 12.8-volt battery bank, those are the same. Let's talk about battery capacity. So that's how much electricity that a battery can hold. Battery capacity is measured in amp hours. Now, amp hours simply means using so many amps in 1 hour. Now let's take one battery. This battery, let's call it 5 amp hour battery. If our lights consumed 1 amp, we could presume that this battery from a full charge would run for 5 hours. That is assuming that the battery is fully charged and reaches full zero. With these lithium batteries, you can drain them fully empty and not damage the battery. This is unlike AGM batteries, like what you might find in a car, where you have to maintain at least 50% charge. So this is why I always say, stick with lithium. Lithium batteries are cheap enough nowadays where you can get a good lithium battery bank and it won't break the bank entirely. Now let's say I have 2 batteries, both 5 amp hour batteries. How do I make them a 10 amp hour battery? Well, I'm going to connect the negative to the negative terminal and the positive to the positive terminal, and this will effectively give me a 10 amp hour battery bank at 12.8 volts. This comes into play as later in the video when I go over my battery bank. I have 4 batteries wired in parallel, like you see here. Parallel simply means that you connect all of the negative terminals and all of the positive terminals. The voltage of the battery bank stays at 12.8 volts. Always use identical batteries. That means same size, same brand, and same model. You may be able to get away with mixing 2 different models of the same battery, but it's better to be safe than sorry. These batteries can overheat and do a lot of damage if they are configured incorrectly. Quickly touching back on parallel versus series again. parallel, your amp hours or your capacity of your batteries increases while the voltage stays the same. If you wire batteries in series, meaning you wire one positive to the next negative and so on, the voltage increases, but the battery capacity stays the same. For simplicity's sake, in this video, we're only going to go with parallel wiring for a battery bank. Now, not to say that batteries wired in series are inferior in any way. In fact, they're a great solution, but it's a bit more of a complex configuration. And where I have my battery bank wired in parallel, it's just easier to share with you what I've done and the pros and cons of my setup. Now, that being said, let's hop to the back of the van and continue on with the rest of the video. So without further ado, let's get back to the battery bank and show you guys what powers the home I have behind me. The sun's currently setting right now. I'm in northern Washington and it is getting cold quick. So rather than take any time and clean my van, I'm going to show you how it is as I've been living in it the past 2 years. It's not that bad. Just cut me some slack, all right? All right, super convenient. Being able to have one big slider underneath your bed in your garage, your van, be able to pull out everything all at once. Okay, so here we are, we're under my bed. This is my electrical side of underneath my bed, what I call my garage, because it's kind of the storage space of the van. Now I have 4 of these batteries here. Each individually are 206 amp hours of lithium iron phosphate batteries. I wired them in parallel for a total of 824 amp hours of lithium battery power. Now, how the heck did I get here? I'm going to explain. Bear with me. This was by far the most expensive part of my van build. Now, that being said, I looked up the prices of these batteries as well as newer batteries have come out in the past 3 years, and I was dumbfounded. These batteries have come down in price at least by half. And I'll go over kind of some prices and different options later in the video, but you will not need to spend the amount of money that I spent to get this amount of battery capacity and this quality battery. Now, the battery that I actually ended up going with, I think the gold standard in van life and RV life is Battleborn batteries. And when you get a gold standard battery, usually you can presume it's going to be the most expensive. And I wanted to shop around for different options. I wanted to see if I could find anything cheaper for maybe 90% of the quality. And that's how I landed on SOK batteries. This video is not sponsored. I just found SOK batteries reading through different forums and listening to a couple of YouTube videos, and I decided I'd give them a shot. So I bought 4 of their 206 amp hour lithium batteries, all self-heated and Bluetooth, meaning when it's winter time like this and it's freezing cold out, these batteries will use a little bit of power to heat themselves if need be, so that my electrical system never fails. Now, there's only been one instance where they've needed to heat themselves, and it was where I forgot to turn my heater on. And long before the electrical system died, my water system froze. So I had other issues other than my electrical system, but this electrical system is absolutely bomb-proof. And that example kind of shows it. So one thing to point out for anyone who's new to electrical, these are 12-volt batteries. Now, 12 volt can be thought of as anything that plugs into a USB outlet, such as charging your iPhone. I run my lights off of 12 volt, my heater runs 12 volt. Basically, I try to run as much in my van off of 12 volt power as possible. And there are really only 2 voltages you have to worry about, 12 volt and 120 volt. 120 volt, think anything that plugs into a house outlet, a toaster, a blender, your water heater if it's electric, an induction stove, anything that heats up electrically, such as a curling iron, straightening thing, anything for your hair, electric space heaters, kind of like a big van no, because like they use up so much power. Most importantly, my laptop is 120 volts. So I have to power the monitors and my laptop off of a 120 volt charger. But you'll find as you kind of dive into the van electrical realm that a lot of things can be powered off of 12 volt. My fridge, my air conditioner is powered off of 12 volt. Most of my things are 12 volt. Now I'm going to get into 120 volt in a whole separate video on inverter chargers. So for this video, we're going to keep everything 12 volt. Super simple. These batteries are wired in parallel, meaning I just connected all of the positive terminals and all the negative terminals. 12 volt is simple. It's positive, negative. And so far, I've had 0 issues with this battery bank. This whole electrical system has been perfect. So next, let's go into how much of this power that I actually use in a given day and how I monitor that, where my batteries are at, how much power am I using, Let's take a look. For that, we're gonna go up front. All right, now real quick, as we make our way to the front of the van, explaining how long 824 amp hours of lithium battery lasts me, 4 days. 4 days of consistent use with very little solar. Now, if I get good solar, that extends that amount of time, but that is 4 days of 8 to 9 hours of work on my laptop, cooking with my electrical induction stove, using electrical hot water for a fast shower, and any other small electrical need that I have in the van. 4 days from 100% charge down to near zero. Now, I'm rarely at 100%, and I really try not to go underneath 20%. In a couple of cases, I've gotten as low as 5%, but I've never really run out of electricity, and I never really want to. But for the simplicity's sake of this video, I'm going with the overall 4 days of power off of 824 amp hours. So that means I go roughly through 208 amp hours per day that I'm in the van. In further videos, I'm gonna share how I charge the batteries, how much solar really impacts, but having 824 amp hours of lithium battery capacity allows me to stay at a ski resort for a full weekend, allows me to stay at a mountain bike trailhead in a remote area for a little bit longer without having to drive, without relying on solar or any means of charging per se. But without further ado, let's take a look at how I monitor these batteries. All right, so how do I monitor my van batteries? How do I know when they're fully charged, half charged, how much electricity I have left? Well, I've tried out 2 different battery monitors, and there's one that I like a lot better than the other. I'll go through them both because one is cheaper and more budget friendly, but one I think makes it significantly easier to live in a van coming from living in a fixed home. All right, so the first battery monitor I'm gonna show you, I kind of keep as a backup, and I keep it in this overhead cabinet here. I put a light in here just temporarily. See if that focuses. This is the Victron BMV 712 Smart Battery Monitor. Now, this battery monitor is super simple and a little bit more affordable. However, I found it a little bit misleading to start. Keep in mind, I didn't have an electrical background. So where you see the voltage up here, I figured that the voltage would go up from 14.6, where it says it's fully charged, down to 12.8. And quickly found out that is not how voltage works. I'm going to try to normalize everything on a percentage scale. So you can go through here and get a percentage of where your batteries are at. And currently mine are at 94.7, which seems fairly accurate since I had them fully charged this morning, and the van has just kind of been running off of a charger all day without much solar. Now, this battery monitor works and it plugs into any Victron system. So therefore, if you're on a budget, this is the one I recommend you use. For me, I use it as a backup, and gray doesn't really go with the wood theme of the van, so I keep it kind of hidden in this upper cabinet. Now on to the much sleeker battery monitor that I use regularly. This is the Seamarine Pico battery monitor, and I think this thing is borderline perfect for van life. Now, it takes a little bit of configuration as you have to enter in your battery bank capacity and a few variables, but it does a number of calculations for you. So as you can see from my previous battery monitor, it still shows that 94% charged. It gives me the number of amp hours that I have left. It gives me the current. So this is how much electricity my van's using with the lights, with my fridge running. I got a small fan running for my composting toilet. So that adds up to about 3.2 amps for all of my electrical that is currently running in the van. Gives me my voltage, and most importantly, the time remaining at this current. So at 3.2 amps, if I had no incoming charge, these van batteries will last me for 9 days, 8 hours, which is awesome to see. This switches to time to fully charged when it's charging or when there is a greater electrical flow coming into the battery bank than what it's expending. Now on top of this, you can switch the screen around in a number of different ways. It has a built-in barometer for pressure. It comes with a temperature gauge, which I keep back by the battery bank. You can see because I just had the back of the van open, it is 43 degrees back there, but it'll warm up as I turn the heater on. You can connect a gray water tank, which my sensor is currently disconnected, but you can connect tank sensors so you can monitor your gray water, your fresh water, any fluid you can monitor in the van from this monitor. And you can also configure it to monitor your solar income, how much any one appliance is using. Now, I didn't have much electrical experience when I was hooking this up, so I hooked it up very simply, and I still find it to be incredibly useful. This battery monitor system is a little bit more expensive than the BMV 712, but I find it much easier to use, and you can expand it to show all different types of statistics about your van and your electrical and water usage. I'll add a link in the description below to the Seamarine Pico battery monitor, as well as the Victron BMV 712 smart battery monitor. All right, so now that we've looked at my battery bank and the ways that I monitor my battery bank, let's take a look at a few of the biggest appliances and how much electricity they actually pull from my battery bank. For this, I'm going to use a Seamarine Pico battery monitor, and the way I'm going to do it, to keep it kind of a real world model, I'm going to have one camera set up on the Seamarine Pico so you can see the constant draw from my van batteries. So that's things like my fridge, my composting toilet fan, the lights, and the USB outlets I have plugged in at any given time. And that usually runs me between 1.5 to 4 amps. And I'm going to have a second camera running when I turn on my inverter to run my induction stove, my water heater, my laptop monitor, an air fryer, and a waffle maker, because I use it pretty often for breakfast. So let's jump right in. Okay, first test is I'm going to be testing my induction stove. Now, a few of these things I'm going to be testing are 120 volt appliances, including this induction stove. For the sake of this video not getting incredibly long, I'm going to cover inverter chargers in a separate video, talking about all the different sort of efficiency losses and options you have for inverter chargers. So if you are interested in that content, I will be filming that video in the near future, so be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. But for now, I have my second camera on my Seamarine Pico battery monitor, so you'll be able to see my battery monitor jump in real time for how much electricity I'm using. Now, currently I'm at 76% battery, and I have over 10 days remaining. With the lights on and the small USB outlets and such, I'm only using about 1.15 amps, which is next to nothing. I could last quite a while at this current power draw. So first things first, I'm going to log into my Victron Bluetooth inverter charger. I'm going to turn it on. What you'll notice right away is that my power draw jumped up a little bit by about 3 amps, and that's the inefficiency. It's just the little bit of power that an inverter charger uses just to stay on. But that will be covered more in a later video on inverter chargers specifically. So we're running right around 4 amps right now. When I turn on my dual burner induction stove, which I will have linked below, I love this electric induction stove. I wouldn't recommend it if you have the option to do propane, but if you're like me and you are worried about using propane in your van, this is probably the best electric stove you could possibly get. 2 burners, it goes from a power level of 1 to 9. So let's start out with a single burner on 5. This will boil water very quickly. 5 will take a little bit, but usually if I have boil water, the 7 out of 9, I'll be boiling water in a minute or 2. But as you can see, a 5 out of 9 power on the induction stove uses around 79 amps. So you'll see my time remaining jump way down from over 10 days down to a day and 14 days and 10 hours. They'll continue to jump down as the battery monitor recalculates. If I do quick math in my head, around 80 amps, 627 amp hours left, I would be able to boil this water somewhere around 8 hours before I totally drain my battery. Now, nobody does that, but it gives you an idea. I could run this the 5 out of 9 for 8 hours. Now, what happens if I turn it up to max power? 9 out of 9. The amps jump up to 120 amps. So I could run that for somewhere around 5 hours. Now, this comes into play with your maximum draw that you can pull from your battery bank. If you have batteries wired in parallel, your maximum draw, the number of amps that you can pull from your battery bank, it grows. I will cover this a little bit later, but if you're going to have one singular battery as your battery bank, here's something to consider. Your max amperage that you can draw has a limit. And chances are, if you have a 100 amp hour battery, 125 amps, that would last you maybe 30 to 40 minutes if you had a full battery. So it's something to consider. Where I have an 824 amp hour battery bank, this will last me a few hours. One reason to go with a slightly larger battery bank if your budget allows. Now within less than a minute, 909, this water is already boiling. So I'm gonna turn this off. All right, next we're gonna do an air fryer / mini oven. This was my electric solution to not having an oven in the van. I wanted to still be able to make roasted vegetables, chicken thighs, chicken breasts, roasted potatoes. I wanted to be able to have oven functionality in a van. Now, if you can do a propane oven, I think that is far more efficient. So let's see how much power this draws. I'm gonna have it run at 400 degrees, air frying for 15 minutes. I think that's pretty typical for chicken thighs. Give or take 10 degrees in a couple minutes. Now my amperage without this on is right around 5 amps. So let's hit start. And just like that, my amperage jumps up to 160, 155 amps. Again, this is a big power draw, and where this will be running for 15 minutes, this will do a good dent in my battery bank. So you'll see on my battery monitor, the time remaining jumps down to 14 hours. I think it would jump way down 13 hours. If I do my calculations correctly, this air fryer would only be able to last 4 hours running. So you don't exactly have the luxury of a home oven where you could do like a long slow roast, but for air frying some chicken thighs, making yourself a good home cooked meal, this is a good option, but it does do a dent on your battery bank. If you have a 100 or even a 200 amp hour battery bank, running this air fryer is not going to quite cut it. This will take too much power. It'll last you a couple minutes at best. All right, next up is my water heater that I use for my indoor and my outdoor showers. I don't really use this often. I only run hot water to the showers. I really don't find that I need hot water in my sink. You can do it, but I just don't find that I need it all that often. If I need warm water, I'll usually just boil it. Now that being said, I have a 3-gallon electric hot water heater, which heats up water very quickly. However, it's not instant like a propane heater would. So if you have the option, do a propane hot water heater. Are you seeing a pattern? I'm recommending a lot of things that heat up electrically. I recommend you go with propane if you can. But I have a giant battery bank. You don't need that giant battery bank necessarily if you have propane appliances for cooking and heating hot water. Anyways, I have my hot water heater on a switch back here. So right now we are reading around 4.5 amps on the Sea Marine Pico battery monitor. When I switch this on, you jump way up to around 135 amps. Again, similar to the air fryer and the induction stove, it's only going to last me maybe 4 or 5 hours. Now, it only takes about 5 to 8 minutes to heat up, but you have to do that once per shower because it's only 3 gallons. So you get a quick 3-gallon shower, and then, that takes still a good chunk of your battery bank. Even if you are running a 200 amp hour battery bank, that would chew up, I'd say, a good 25 to 30 amps. That's 10% of your battery right there for one shower in a given day. All right, next up, 12-volt appliance. My 12-volt electric air conditioner. Now, this is a game changer if you live in a really hot climate. So if you're in Utah in the summer or Colorado in the summer, this air conditioner dumps cold air down into your bed or wherever you have it situated. I have mine on my bed because I really only use it at night. when I'm sleeping, I'll just set it on eco mode, and that does it for me. Now, eco mode runs at around 9 amps, which I cannot believe it delivers cold air pulling only 9 amps. So I'll leave it on for 8 to 10 hours a night. So an hour before bed and an hour after bed as I'm waking up. Now that's around 90 amps. For someone with a 100 amp hour battery, that's your battery. So that's you can't really run a 100 amp hour battery bank with the air conditioner. Now 400 amp hour, you could do that if you had some good solar during the day, which if it's hot out, I imagine you do. But fully blasted, the 12 volt air conditioner uses around 50 to 60 amps. And I really don't ever feel I need to fully blast it. Eco mode usually does just fine. I'm really impressed with this Dometic 12 volt air conditioner. I will link this down in the bio below. So last but not least, we have my laptop editing and workstation. I have a Dell XPS with a 130 watt charger. Now my work laptop takes a 180 watt charger. So the results of this test would definitely depend on what your laptop needs for a charger. But I think 130 watts is pretty middle of the road standard. So let's start by just plugging it into this outlet. Okay, it's plugged in. And we are reading around 8.7 amps. And that's just with everything kind of running in the van right now. My fridge is probably cooling down and my freezer is probably cooling down. I got lights running. I have a battery charging on a USB charger. So I will now plug my laptop in. We're going to go from around 8 amps to about 15. So 130 watt charger divided by 12 volts is roughly 10 amps. A little over, but well, simple math, roughly 10 amps. So you could expect 10 amps or less draw from this charger. Now I'm reading 8. My battery is pretty near charged, and I think the charger slows down as you near 100% on your laptop. But keep in mind, so I'm looking at around 15 amps total draw on my battery bank right now. I have to sustain this for 8 to 9 hours for a work day. And then I usually am editing video or online researching or casual like Netflix, watching YouTube or something, probably an extra 2 hours a day, maybe 3 hours. So for, let's call it 10 to 11 hours a day, I have to run 14 to 15 amps. So that's around 150 amp hours per day, give or take. And then you have to add in, I'm cooking 3 meals a day. So that is kind of what makes up for the additional 50 amp hours of battery consumption. I will, if I don't take a shower at the gym, sometimes I'll take an outdoor shower in the summertime, but most of the time in the wintertime, I'll take a shower at the gym. So I won't use a water heater, but that's kind of how I land on 206 amp hours a day, about 25% of my battery, and how I got to 4 days. Now, keep in mind, when I bought these batteries, that is what I could afford. I had saved up a bunch of money. I wanted the most money that I spent, I wanted it to go into my battery bank because I knew it was crucial for my longevity in the van. And 824 amp hours for 206 amp hour batteries wired in parallel was the absolute maximum I felt I could afford at the time. Now keep in mind, I'm often running 2 extra monitors, one above and one below, that allow me to write code on 2 monitors, edit on 2 monitors, game on 2 monitors. Those together draw roughly another 10 amps. If I run one monitor, it's maybe 5 or 6 amps. Nonetheless, that brings my total consumption up to roughly 25 amps per hour. In a 10-hour day, that's 250 amp hours. Now, this can be offset by charging via solar or by running a generator. I'm going to talk about all different types of charging in future videos. The next video that I'm going to go over is all about solar, which is typically how I offset my power usage. If I can bring in enough wattage from solar, I can offset a large amount and almost run my entire computer setup off of solar power alone, which means I net 0 power loss on my battery bank. It's all powered by solar. Now, if you want to be the first to know when that video comes out, make sure you subscribe to the channel and then you can get notified as soon as I drop that video. Lastly, smaller appliances like water pumps for my sink or my shower, USB outlets, lights, small fans, my MaxxAir fan, my cellular internet. All of these appliances take very little draw. So together, the appliances I just listed maybe take an amp or two of draw, which is typically offset even on cloudy days by solar. So I don't really count those two significant power draw, and in your planning, you can keep them on a spreadsheet, but recognize whatever solar system you have, typically your lights, USB, fans, water pumps, all those things are kind of offset by solar. I have a Dometic fridge freezer, 12 volt, that takes maybe 4 amps when it is running and cooling. So dependent on what temperature you keep that, that cost me maybe 15 to 20 amp hours per day. So not that bad. Doesn't really affect me too much, but that's probably my biggest 12 volt draw. So now that we've covered all the different types of power draws and appliances that you could possibly have in your van, I'm going to showcase a few batteries I did some homework on that give you the best value per amp hour, as well as some features to consider or some features to skip if you might not need them. So let's jump right into that. All right, so let's dive into the batteries I have and some more modern batteries on the market. First and foremost, I bought my batteries on August 9th of 2022. Since then, the price of those exact batteries has dropped by over half. I bought 4 206 amp hour heated Bluetooth lithium iron phosphate batteries from SOK for $1,200 each for a total of $4,800. Now, to equalize the value amongst batteries, that comes out to an average of $5.83 per amp hour of battery capacity. Now, the same batteries as of February 11th, 2025 have come down from $1,200 each down to $585 for an average of $2.84 per amp hour. So those 206 amp hour batteries from SOK batteries are still a great deal. Exact same batteries I have today, brand new, $2.84 per amp hour. They also have a 100 amp hour battery that is $2.99 per amp hour. And they have a new 280 amp hour version of the battery for $2.84 per amp hour. Now, I don't have any battery sponsors for this video. I found SOK batteries organically, and I think they deliver a good product. I have had zero issues with their 206 amp hour battery. And if I were to rebuild my battery bank, I'd probably do it again with their 280 amp hour batteries. They have the same price per amp hour, more capacity in a similar footprint. So size-wise, that's very valuable in a van. The size of your batteries matter when you are working in a very fixed space. So those 280 amp hour batteries seem like a great value. Now they do make a 314 amp hour battery for roughly $1,200. And keep in mind, 314 amp hours, that's the same price as when I bought my 206 amp hour battery. So that comes out to an average of $3.81 per amp hour. But you get like a number of different extra features that you can go onto their website and check out. Now, depending on what your budget is, the best battery on their site is probably that 314 amp hour battery. Best value, in my opinion, is 280 amp hour battery. It has the bells and whistles you need, and it seems like a great buy. Now, I did a number of comparisons. See if it focuses. On Renogy, Battleborn, and SOK. Now, Battleborn batteries, which are kind of the gold standard, their 100 amp hour battery is $749 for an average of $7.49 per amp hour. A 270 amp hour battery is $21.49 for an average of $7.95 per amp hour. So you can try to convince me that they have a warranty. I'm sure they have great customer service, bells and whistles, all the features. Battleborn is just at that price range way too expensive for me. If you can afford it, great, awesome. I hope you have the best of luck with it. But the price alone is a killer for me. Now, looking at Renogy has some interesting options. if I were to do my battery bank again, I also would heavily consider Renogy. They have a Core Mini 300 amp hour battery that is priced at $2.67 per amp hour, and so that is slightly cheaper than SOK's batteries. And they have a 300 amp hour heated battery. So they have the Core Mini, which is just the battery, and then the 300 amp hour, which is a heated battery. This is essential if you are doing winter van life. You want heated batteries. In case your van ever gets cold, you can still use the batteries. They will use a little bit of power to heat themselves so that they do not get damaged. And the 300 amp hour heated batteries comes out to $3.33 per amp hour. They also have a 100 amp hour Core Mini, $2.80 per amp hour. Now, the downside with Renogy is their footprint. Renogy batteries are night and day bigger than SOK. And in my van, I'd have to kind of reconfigure my electrical space. And while Renogy is cheaper, great budget options for anyone who's looking for the cheaper option. Renogy is cheaper than SOK. However, SOK has a smaller footprint. So some options to weigh there. Lastly, a lot of people are probably going to ask me about Jackery's setup. Now, Jackery has a 2000 watt hour, carefully here, watt hour battery. Now divide 2000 by 12 volts, and you get roughly 170 amp hour battery. And that comes out to $14.99. Now that's $8.82 per amp hour. So I'm trying to normalize everything with the price per amp hour here. Jackery, you get the benefit of, like, you can pick it up like a lunchbox and carry it anywhere, but it's a relatively small battery at 170 amp hours. At $8.82, it's pretty expensive, but you do not have to do all the electrical wiring yourself. It's a pretty self-sealed kit, so I wouldn't write it off. I think it's priced appropriately for users who just want to have a weekend adventure van. If you want to just run basic electronics off of it, I think it's a great option. Now, other things to consider when looking at Renogy, SOK batteries, etc. When you're building your battery bank, many of these batteries have a max charge, a max discharge, so the currents that can be pulled from the battery and pushed into the battery at any given time. So if you wire your batteries in parallel, you can add these currents together. My 206 amp hour batteries from SOK have a max discharge of 150 amps. And you saw a number of my appliances get right on up there, 130, 140, 150 amps. So if I ran my induction stove and my air fryer, which is something you might do if you're cooking a meal, that would exceed the max discharge for a single battery. So the answer there is that if you want to increase that max discharge, you need to wire multiple batteries in parallel. And think about it. If you have a single battery that can discharge 150 amps at the max and a second battery that can discharge a second set of 150 amps, you therefore, if you wire two batteries in parallel, get 300 amps of max discharge. Now I have 4 wired in parallel, so 150 times 4. I could theoretically discharge 600 amps from those batteries. In theory, now there are a number of other stoppers. I believe I have a 450 amp breaker as a main breaker just after the batteries, and that ties into the cabling that I used and making sure that my whole system is safe to operate. I never come close to breaking really 200 amps if I'm running 2 appliances at once. That's probably the max. I think the most I've ever done is 220 amps. So this is something to factor in when you are looking at batteries. If you're on a budget and you're looking at a 300 amp hour battery or 2 200 amp hour batteries, I would go with the 2 200s. Not only because you get more battery capacity, but you also get a greater battery discharge. You can also charge at a higher rate. Now, usually charging isn't an issue if you have 2 or more batteries, but for full-time living, I really wouldn't go below 400 amp hours of battery power. You could probably get away with 300. Last thing to consider is the weight of batteries. So the downside to having more batteries is you increase the weight. And Sprinter vans Transits, ProMasters, they all can only carry so much weight. So keeping your build light is crucial. As someone who built their van relatively heavy, if I go back and do it again, I would definitely try to build my van lighter. At that, it is important to check the weight of all your batteries. Just consider them. So for instance, Renogy has a bigger footprint than SOK for their 300 amp hour batteries. But if you go with the Core Mini battery weighs in at 55.1 pounds, where the 206 amp hour SOK battery weighs 48 pounds. So you get more capacity for a small increase in weight. To sum things up here, if you're going to use your van for full-time van life, I highly recommend at least planning for 400 amp hours of battery banks. That's two 206 amp hour batteries. I don't really know why you would go with 100 amp hour batteries. I mean, you could technically wire 4 of them in parallel, but you would be losing out on a lot of space. I mean, you saw how I have my batteries pretty well organized on my shelf. But if I could have fewer batteries on there, of course I would. Space is a huge asset in a small space like a van. For me personally, 824 amp hours last me 4 days in the van of full-time use and work and life. And I really heavily rely on my Seamarine Pico battery monitor, which comes in, at least today, at around $600 for the entire system. Whereas the BMV 712 smart battery monitor comes in at around $149. So the BMV 712 smart battery monitor is night and day cheaper. I won't argue with you there. But the Seamarine Pico is so usable and tracks so many different metrics of the van. I really think the Seamarine is a great candidate to consider when looking at battery monitors. All of this homework that I've done on batteries, battery monitors, etc., I'm going to leave links to in the description below to make it easy for you all to compare and contrast everything that I've been talking about in this video. And now I know there are going to be a number of people who will ask, what about charging? So charging is going to be covered over the next 3 videos. I'm going to do in the next video an entire overview of my solar panel array. I firmly believe that I have maxed out the amount of solar that I could possibly fit on the roof rack on the Sprinter van. I have the 170 non-extended Sprinter, given that I also have a Max Air fan and an air conditioner and a Starlink up there. And I'll also talk about DC to DC charging. So charging from your alternator when your van's running, that's a main source of charging. And in a third video, I'm going to do inverter chargers and shore power charging. All of these systems are crucial to me living in this van full time and working a full-time remote job. And I hope you guys stick around for all of them, and feel free to ask any questions in the comments below that you want to see in those future videos. Now, is there something that I missed? Any battery companies that I should have called out? Let me know in the comments below. I will either respond to those comments directly or I'll include them in a future video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around for this whole video. I hope you guys found it helpful. I'm trying to make these videos to be the videos that I wish I had seen when I was building this van. So stick around, subscribe, like this video, and share it with whoever you think it could be most helpful for. In the meantime, I'll catch you guys in the next one.